Welcome to the autosportradio.com 2021 show. We are still at the Racing Museum, the Grand King Race Shop at 8155 Crawfordsville Road. If you want to take a tour, get a hold of them. They'll be happy to take you on a tour when they have the time. Just give them a call. The number is 317-820-3595. Today's show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the NTT IndyCar Series, SVRA, McGilvery's Pub and Eatery in Speedway, and VP Insurance. A couple of interesting things, I think. If you have an interest or you know a company that would like some exposure and do some fine networking, then you need to call the Top Gun Race Shop and talk to Bill or Stephanie about getting involved. They have several programs for sponsors, associate sponsors, and they have a brick program that Stephanie can tell you about. So give the office a call. Tell them what you can do, what you're interested in accomplishing, and they can help you. Their number is, when I find it, 317-820-3595. Give them a call. If you know somebody or you are someone who would like to get involved in the sport, it's growing and growing like crazy. It's a good time to do it. So give them a call. Top Gun Racing. Get involved with the race team as well. Is it time to replace your roof and you want to have an inspection and have somebody tell you, yeah, you're all right, or no, you need a replacement? Give Ted Howlett a call. You can arrange for an estimate. Somebody take a look at it. You can reach him at 317-500-3370. Are you looking for something for a friend for Christmas, an IndyCar race fan? Well, I highly recommend the 500shop.com. If he doesn't have it, it's not in existence. You can give him a call. His cell number is 317-985-0214. And ask for Mike Spangler. You probably won't have to ask. It's his cell phone. He'll answer it. Are you a real fan of going to see a dentist? Well, I can change that for you. The Indy Dental Group. Indy 500 veteran Dr. Jack Miller and his wife, Dr. Liz Lewis, have a spectacular practice. They got great people. You will love them. My honey goes there and she enjoys actually going to see the dentist. Make an appointment. Number is 317-846-6125. My computer guy has an office. It's at 549 Fleming Street, which is on West Washington or East Washington, actually about a mile east of Lyndhurst. If you have a computer problem, call him. Tell him what your problem is. If you can't get to his office, he can come to your house. His number is 317-938-7711. That's Steve Freeze.
That's still West Washington.
We were just out yesterday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Had a couple of guys taking rides in the two-seater. If you want to do it, you'll love it. Everybody got out. He said, how was it? Greatest thing I ever did. Get a hold of them. You can go on the IndyRacingExperience.com website and find out an open date that you could make. Or you can call Shonda. The number is 317-243-7171. Find a date, and while you're there, tell her, or in the promo box, if you go online, DK1, you get a 50% discount. There's a time for insurance for your home, your car, your commercial property, or for life insurance. Mike Pardee can help you. You'll probably find, as most of us have, you get better coverage for less money. Number is 317-248-0070. Tell them what you need, what you're looking for. And again, you'll probably get better coverage for less money. Are you interested in taking a ride, touring some of the shops around town? They got Bill and Stephanie have a car that can pick you up wherever you are. They can take groups up to 6 to 8 people, actually. You can go to a couple of race shops, go to the museum, and they'll bring you back from where you started. So give them a call, check it out. Again, you can reach them at 317-820-3595. If you're in a vintage fan, SVRA is the place. And if you're into the Trans Am series, it's back alive and well. Really well, doing really well, extremely. You can go to svra.com and subscribe to Speed Tour Magazine, which is a spectacular magazine, first-class publication. You'll love it. And you can also find out the schedule, hit the tab for schedule and find out where the Trans Am or the vintage cars are running. If SVRA does it, it's first class. And now, upcoming. My guest today is the CEO, the founder, the president, and executive publisher of Racer Magazine, one of the finest. I'm telling you, this is a top flight publication. You want to follow racing, this is it. And racer.com. And as I was commenting to Paul before we started, it's amazing to me. The checkered flag is just waving and there's a story. My guest, of course, is Paul Pfanner. And Paul, it amazes me how quickly stories, and that not only IndyCar, NASCAR, or NHRA or motorcycle races, but European Formula One races, they're up there within an hour at the longest. How in the world do you get it done so quick?
Well, first off, we hire people who actually know what they're doing as opposed to the owner of the company. So the team that is in the field writing these reports are very experienced, very motivated. They have access to backstories and resources that few have, and they're just ready. And it's a joy to watch them work. I do get to see the email chatter going on, and it's awe-inspiring watching how they pull stories together and how they chase down big news leads.
Now, you've been involved in racing for many years. You started in your first creative agency and in-house publishing in 1979. So you've been involved in the sport for a long time. Did you ever say, I don't need to write, I can drive, I can race, I can do this?
Well, that's the misadventure that started all of this, is that it was almost 50 years ago now that this journey began. I decided I wanted to go to a Formula One race that was a match race at Ontario Motor Speedway, which was a replica of Indy. It was a brand new track in California. And there was a certain Italian-American gentleman that I was particularly fond of, thought he was absolutely awesome race car driver because I'd seen him race at Ascot and Riverside, and Mario Andretti was in Formula One. So I had to go see that. I wanted him to win. And unfortunately, they didn't give out media credentials to 16-year-old kids. So I did the next best thing. I made my own. And we went into the racetrack with 4 of my buddies, and we not only did we go in, we filmed the adventure. So I did make a movie of it during pandemic where I found the footage and made a short film series that highlights the footage. It's called Forging Ahead. And that's how my career began. And I from that moment onward, that's what I wanted to do. But I also wanted to race Formula Ford because that looked like the way to become a Formula One or IndyCar driver to me. And so that's how I started.
When did you discover that as a race driver, you might not be the best in the world in the top 5,000, as you said, in Formula Ford? When did you decide that you could probably write better than you could drive?
Well, I think the realization about the racing stuff I haven't quite come to yet. I still think I can be world champion, as most people who've driven. But the really fortunate thing for me was the first night I ever walked into a race shop. I walked into a place called Automotive Development in Orange County, California. And that company eventually became Swift Race Cars. They ultimately built Champ Cars, Atlantic Cars, so forth. But the people in that company were at the highest level of accomplishment and ability. And they included over time Mike Hull, who runs Chip Ganassi Racing as the managing director. So he mentored me. So did the founder of Automotive Development, Paul White. So over time, I had access to really good equipment and good circumstances to find out I could drive reasonably well. I was competitive. I could be at the front. I could win races. But did I have the commitment to go do this? Not like the people I was racing against. There'd be younger ones that come along that were simply, they were ahead of where I was at and they had more runway. And I just at one point realized I got to pick a lane. I love driving a racing car. I love being competitive. My race car is going to be my business. And when I started my own company in 1979, that was really the transition. And that was really with a discussion with Mike. Mike was going to do something else. Mike Hull was. I left the company I was at because I was a terrible magazine editor. I was behind getting the magazine out, really incompetent. And I think there's something else I could do, which I'll run the business. Maybe that'll turn out. And so I got together with the fellow who was the CFO for Dan Gurney's business. And the girlfriend of one of Dan's drivers was, they were friends of mine. And we created a company called Pfanner, Cathron and Brown. It literally started as a discussion in the prep bay at All American Racers, where they got tired of me complaining about my boss. And the conversation was, Paul, why don't you start your own company? And I think it was Dan that said, Gary can help you out. And Gary had this horrified look on his face, but before long. he was working with us. So we're a descendant of AAR is how I look at it.
It's amazing how motorsports is intertwined so many ways. I mean, I've been here since 1964.
Yep.
And at my current age, I should have, packed it up and gone to Florida and sat on the beach and drank Mai Tais, but I can't handle but one. So I figured the trip down there for Mai Tai isn't worth it anymore.
Yeah.
But, it's a great sport, and the people, 99 out of 100 of them are top of the line. I mean, they're some of the best, and that's what intrigued me and has ever since I got involved in it. How smart they are, how easy they are to get along with for the most part. But when I first started following, it was amazing to me that if you had an argument, I did a lot of short track, followed a lot of short track.
Yeah.
And they'd have an argument at the track, they'd settle it with a 2x4, and the next morning they're trading tools, rebuilding the cars for the next night's race.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. And my dad had owned a midget when he was younger, and we'd go to Ascot, 605 Speedway, Corona Raceway, and I just grew up going, seeing race cars on dirt or pavement at night, which still fills me with excitement and joy when I walk into a racetrack and see cars moving under the lights. And it was just enthralling, but I was really struck by how people were so fiercely competitive and got along. And I think early in my first race I ever saw was on a closed circuit broadcast of the 1964 Indy 500. And talk about growing up within 2 minutes. There were two people, who lost their lives as a result of an accident. Right. And it made me realize that racing was really real. Everything I was kind of experiencing in my life, I didn't have a direct connection to something that was so real and worth risk. And going to the races, there was always this edge of something bad might happen. Yep. Yeah, usually good things did. And one of the best things that ever happened is I was at Ascot and I heard this voice behind me saying, "Get your speed sport news, get your speed sport news." And the voice was familiar. And I turned around and literally standing before me was Chris Economaki. And I grabbed the paper and kind of like this, and I started to pull it, and he said, "Kid, it's a quarter." I had to turn around and get the quarter from my dad, but oh my God, once I got that as a birthday present, a subscription, and I was off to the races, and Chris became a friend later in life.
Chris was a friend of mine. He did the program a couple of times.
Yeah, what a
great guy. Great guy.
Yeah.
And I used to marvel, even prior to a year or two before his death, he'd come up to the media center and they'd have an old typewriter sitting there just for him.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to use a computer, but he knew how to type on a typewriter.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that Chris was always on the lead lap about what was going on. It was just, I was always so amazed how he knew absolutely everything that was happening.
Yeah, it was very interesting to listen to him, because he didn't ask the same question to the same guy. Hey, what was it like out there? He already pretty well knew that. He had good questions to ask, which I found very interesting. Yeah,
and he was good at putting people off balance a little bit, but still getting an answer, which I liked. He did that to me a lot.
Well, I still marvel at what you've done. And if somebody hasn't already subscribed to Racer Magazine, how do they get it? And is your digital separate from the magazine?
Yeah, well, first off, our website is free. I'm not a fan of putting it behind a paywall. It belongs to all of you who love the sport, and as Robin Miller would remind us regularly, we work for you. So we would hope that you would support us by subscribing, and there's a subscription at the button at the top of racer.com. And the website to learn about the magazine and subscribe is info.racer.com, info.racer.com. And the print magazine exists in a digital format as well for people who want it on their phones and tablets. It also exists on Apple News Plus. We're the only racing magazine on Apple News Plus. We were invited to be that when they launched the platform. So, in the past few months, we've seen a real growth in digital subs, but I still like the print magazine. We spend, I happen to have two right here because I was cleaning up my briefcase, but that background. But Racer is, very high quality publication. Its sister publication, vintagemotorsport.com, is, identical in production values.
Yeah, that magazine is equal with the one that Tony Perella put out, Speed Tour magazine, first class publication. Yours is as well. It's not some little rag you pick up in a grocery store.
Well,
It is a well published, printed, and it's got a lot of good stuff to read. A lot of good stories.
well, no offense to our friend Tony, but we're racers. We think we're on a different lap, and so it's not a lap down. So I'm really proud of our team, and it's an interesting team because we're a hybrid of what once was many of the lead people at Autosport in the UK. There was a time when my company had sold the majority of it to the British publishing company Haymarket Media, and we ended up pulling over some of their leading talent. Lawrence Foster was the editor-in-chief of Autosport. He's now the editor-in-chief of Racer. Mark Glendenning was the features editor at autosport.com, and he has been running racer.com really well. And we have someone like John Chambers, who's our global sales director, was the global sales director for Haymarket. So we're an Anglo-American company, kind of like AAR was when it started.
Well, again, it's interesting to me because if I may be watching a race on television or on Peacock when I watch stuff that the IndyCar is doing, and others it's on there, and I'll have my computer on if I'm watching television in the digital, and here pop up a story. I said, for Pete's sake, the dust hasn't settled yet. Here's a story already. It's amazing how your people perform so quickly.
Yeah, and first off, it's nice they can type. That helps.
Yeah.
They've got mad skills with their fingers, but the other part of it is they're born ready. I mean, that's part of being a racer is you anticipate things and you don't wait around. You got to go now. It's always go time when you're working on our site. And just watching the flow of the news this morning, I was on a bunch of these. I call it Zoom hell. No offense, but I spend a lot of time on Zoom, and it's kind of like it's one of these opportunities to multitask. So I'm watching what they're developing on some stories, and my eyes are bugging out because they're onto some big stuff all the time, and it's I can't wait for the world to see what they're finding out next, because they've got some very big stories in development right now.
Well, the other thing I find is that, and I've asked this question actually, why do you talk to, Marshall? Why do you talk to him? Why do you give him a story? Because we trust him.
That's right.
We tell him is what he prints. He doesn't make up something. He doesn't dream. If we don't tell him, he doesn't publish. He doesn't say, well, here's what I think, or here's a rumor.
That's very true. That's very true. And I will also tell you that Robin Miller, who we all miss dearly at this moment, was very much the same way. And there was a real process to verifying. And also there are things that we find out that could be damaging if we release them.
Yes.
And there's stories that are good for the sport, good for the teams, good for the drivers, good for the sponsors. That our awareness of the stories doesn't mean we rush to print them, because there's always a context and there's always an understanding of when would be the right time to do that. Now, we get beaten to the punch occasionally, but I'd rather have us do it in the right way than be first. We want to still be here in 5 to 10 to 20 years or 30 years. We want to be trusted. And I watched in particular Marshall work through some pretty complicated stuff over the last few days with that very issue, and so proud of him, and so proud of his character and how he's just dealt with some conflicting agendas and timelines, and really, really strong character in what he's doing.
Well, one of my things that I'm proud of is I will get information. They'll say, don't say anything. And I don't.
Yeah.
When it comes out, then you can go ahead and talk about it, because I knew about it before it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
I've been told this is not for publication. Fine.
Yeah.
But I can sit at home and say, I know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, we know what's going on, but we also, what's interesting is what shouldn't be going on that's going on. And
yes.
We've over time, been doing this now for 49 years. You learn to let it play out. I remember there was a time when I was sitting on a pre-grid in a Formula Ford race, and I qualified, in the top 10, but not where I should have. And I was frustrated with myself. And Mike pointed to the guy ahead of me and said, just remember to let this guy go. he'll take care of himself within 5 laps. He'll be off the racetrack and don't be part of his accident. And it was kind of stern. I've not had anybody ever say something like that to me, because it was all just go, 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 put your head down and go. And it didn't take 5 laps. It took 2 laps. And that guy was off the road and took somebody else out. And, bingo, I'm up several places. And I remember thinking, okay, that's a good metaphor for life overall. You see stuff that's sideways, and people and situations that are sideways.
Yeah.
Don't be part of their accident. They're going to be an accident. And usually character is an indicator of how it's going to turn out.
You're absolutely right. Now, talking a little bit about IndyCar, do you think the coming across the pond by Formula One drivers, and of course, I'm thinking primarily right now of Romain Grosjean, but Marcus Ericsson is here, and Felix is here, and there's some guys that it's built the European awareness of what IndyCar is, does, and has?
Absolutely. And I was quite literally thinking about this morning, about what it must be like to be one of these supremely talented people who's worked their whole life to get into Formula One. And you've been given a Prius of a race car that's not going to ever get to the front of the grid.
Right.
And you have to drive this damn thing, and you're at a prestige level in Formula One, but that the technical capability of the team and car, due to funding or whatever else, is not allowing you to demonstrate your true ability. And that these drivers have fan bases. They have really amazing energy about them. You look at the social media following of Romain Grosjean's following is enormous compared to most American racers. And they bring audience, they bring validation to the people they race against. They make people consider the competition here to be higher than they thought it was, because there's a general kind of look down your nose at American racing from other parts of the world. I've experienced it. I think that used to be one of those things that would, I think, fire up Dan Gurney and Robin Miller pretty well. But I think it's good. And the idea that we should reject them because they're foreign, and that this should be reserved for only people that came up a certain way, is counter to what the Indianapolis 500 was when it began.
Right.
So I'm really glad to see it, and it's really made a difference. We have gone up massively in audience, and not just in the United States. It's still by far and away the largest audience, but in Europe and England, and in particular. So that is because of these racers coming here to the U.S. to race an IndyCar.
I think it's interesting when Grosjean tested at Barber. I think in the first turn or the second turn or first lap, I can't remember which, he looped the car.
Yeah.
And they said, "What happened?" I said, "I wasn't aware you drive these cars." He said, in Formula One, there's so much downforce, and they got traction control.
Yeah.
All you do is turn the damn thing and hope you turn it at the right place. He said, "But these cars you got to drive." And a big smile on his face. He said, "This is fun." And
Yeah.
he enjoyed all of it, and he's very good with fans. Holy Toledo.
Yeah, he is. And I think that what an interesting mix of personalities and talents in Formula One at the moment. I mean, the people that are at the top of Formula One and the people that are coming into IndyCar from Formula One, it's like, we're a great combustion chamber for the two cultures.
Yes.
What we ultimately need is to have American talent going the other direction into Formula One at some point. I think that would be really, really important. Mario, lit it up when he went over there, or went back there, to be frank, and before the age of the internet. And Phil Hill, one of my other great heroes, did the same thing. And I think it's time for someone on our end to go back over there and represent us like Dan did.
Well, I think the secret to that is if they go there, they got to go there and stay there, not go race and come home, and then show up at the track for the next one. They got to hang around like they do here. The drivers go into the shops and they work with the guys a little bit and tell lies and bring donuts or whatever they do. I think if you're going to run Formula One, you need to be there and spend more time there.
We should get a subscription donut plan to send Long's Donuts to whatever Formula One team an American goes to. That might slow them down a little bit, but I think it'd be cool. I think that cultural immersion is one of the things that everyone looks back on. Michael Andretti's time in Formula One, that might have turned out differently, because there's no doubt Michael was supremely talented as a racing
yeah, no
driver,
question.
and no doubt. And he was at the height of his game, and it only started to come right there at the end. I think that's one of the great missed opportunities for Formula One and for American racing, is that he didn't stay there.
I agree.
But yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, what I think we're also seeing is racers are racers, and they have a common language and affection for other racers. I would go to what was called the Race of Champions. And I went to this event several times, and it was held in the Stade de France in Paris. And the camaraderie between the NASCAR drivers, Formula One drivers, World Rally Championship drivers, IndyCar drivers, and sports car drivers was fabulous. I mean, you'd be around these people and they knew each other's stories. They just had a joy in them about being with these people that spoke a common language, and they were intensely interested in what the others were doing and how they did it. And I was even ballast for Jeff Gordon during one of the races when he beat Sebastian Bourdais, I think it was, in a race driving Porsches in that stadium. And there's nothing like hearing all the French boo when Jeff won. It made me very happy.
You're right. I think the drivers, you don't realize it, but they do follow other drivers, other series. They know pretty much what's going on. And I think they keep mentioning Jimmy Johnson as a 7-time NASCAR championship, but as a champion. But as he will tell you, these are totally different cars. And I don't think anybody expected him to win the first year, but he's made some progress. He's moving up. He's not last every race now. He's in the mid-pack. He's moving.
Yeah, and the irony here is that, in 1993 and 4, when Racer was new, and we had a new advertising client called No Fear. They made clothes. We ultimately worked with them on TV ads, print ads, did all the other collateral. But during that time, we bought go-karts. There was a bunch of us who were racers, identical Briggs and Stratton go-karts. We kept them in a storage container at the No Fear warehouse factory. Jimmy was one of the people that would come and race, and he was racing in the Mickey Thompson series. So I got to know him then, and the people racing were Paul Tracy, Robbie Gordon, Boris Said, Simo, Brian and Mark Simo, Ernie Irvin came, Kyle Petty came, Paul Tracy came and drove off out of the go-kart track and onto the street and started driving away. That's Paul. But we had this great group of people, Jeff Krosnoff, a bunch of Jeremy McGrath, all these racers there. And Jimmy he showed up and immediately figured it out. It was really competitive. And he was a young guy. He was 19, I think, at the time. And I remember thinking, well, this guy's something, because it was not it. Everybody was throwing away all the momentum. He figured it out quickly and went right to the front. And everybody was kind of, wow, this guy's got something. And he wanted to be an IndyCar driver. Rick Mears is his hero. And this is a really amazing story arc for Jimmy to actually subject himself and be vulnerable in the environment he's in. He gets a lot of crap for not instantly being used to driving a car this light and this capable, but his ego has never been out in front of what he does. He's a learning machine, and watch out when he figures it out. And he's working hard to figure it out. And ironically, the managing director of that team is Mike Hall.
Yes.
So, and we're proud to have been associated. Our agency side, we did the livery and branding for American Legion. We rebranded American Legion this year, created a marketing brand for them. And our company designed the livery for the car that Tony Kanaan drove at Indy, and Alex Palou drove at a number of races. And I hope that Jimmy will be driving at Indy next year.
Well, apparently, from what I saw, the test went well. Both of the Romain and Jimmy enjoyed it. They liked it. I think if Jimmy can talk his wife into letting him drive, that might be problem number one.
Yeah, I can understand that. And credit to him for considering that. That's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Besides that, he's got to live with her, so have her mad at you 7 days a week.
Now the reality is she's got to live with him, which is
that's the other problem. Yeah,
that's the other problem. Which when you live with a racer, God knows that's not easy. But yeah,
I have a feeling that Romain will run next year as well, because I gathered he enjoyed it. it's something. The number I worked for 8 or 9, 10 years, whatever it was, for Dick Simon. We had a couple
Yeah.
of drivers. Eliseo Salazar came in. I was
Yes.
in the front gate with a desk when he came in. And I said, welcome and blah, blah, blah. I said, you ever driven an oval? He said, no.
Yeah.
Really? You've never been on an oval? No. I said, you're in for a real treat. And
Yeah.
the thing that I found interesting is most of these guys, were a little, well, actually scared of it because of the speed. And you look in the mirror and there's a guy right there. But once they got and figured it out, they loved it. They all enjoyed it. And I think Romain will be the same thing. Once he gets it figured out, which won't take long, look out, here he comes.
Yeah, and the teams they're with are so good at these things that the car is a very important element in that oval equation, and understanding the changing conditions and the behavior of the cars in traffic and everything else. I think it's still a steep learning curve, but I have great faith that Jimmy Johnson will have moments that make everybody realize why he's Jimmy Johnson. It was starting to become apparent at the end of the season.
Yes.
But my favorite one was the last few laps of the race at Laguna Seca, where our two subjects here came together at the corkscrew. Where Romain threw the car in there in a pretty bold move, and Jimmy basically shut the door on him in a way I think he should have. And I thought, okay, that's racing. I love that. But yeah, it's a wonderful time to be a race fan. And I will say that IndyCar is on a massive surge, as is Formula One. I think IMSA is on the edge of a golden age with all of the things they've got coming in 23. And NASCAR is going to go to a new era, which I do hope is a great one. We've seen massive growth in the NASCAR audience. Anybody who thinks NASCAR is dead is foolish. It's got more than a pulse. There's still nothing like it in terms of audience energy.
Well, the thing that I hear most people complain about is we don't need to take a bathroom break. Why do they?
Yeah.
Why do they stop the race?
Yeah. Well, I think that's corporatitis, and I'm not a fan of artificial stuff in a motor race. I prefer the races to just be races.
Yes,
and be battles. I grew up watching races where there wasn't the good lap fairy that would come out and give you something in the middle of the race. you had to beat the person fair and square on the racetrack in that given number of laps or amount of time, period. The rest of it I feel is superfluous. It's unnecessary, and the fans are smart enough to know the difference between fake and real, and fake fails every time. It doesn't work, and it's repellent to the audience who loves the sport.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of push to pass either. I mean, if you can't get by the guy, well, I mean, you should be able to pass. If you're a race driver and a guy makes a mistake, get him. If you watch Takuma Sato and you watch Romain Grosjean this year, somebody gave him an inch and they go.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, watch, here they come.
That's right. Well, I have mixed feelings on push to pass with the aero packages on most of these cars that are, certainly an IndyCar now. It is difficult to pass in the aero wake of a car, and evenly matched performance of the engines. You no longer have a disparity to speak of between the individual engines, but the manufacturer's engines. If there's a disparity, it's usually not vast. And when I was around racing in the beginning, the cars were all over the map in reliability and sophistication of team and aero and of power and torque, and everything was a bit different. So you had a different dynamic, but then you'd have these races where someone would be 4.5 laps ahead by the end. And so I think there are compromises that need to be made. What I do like about the push to pass is it's rationed. You don't have an endless supply of it. It would be just ridiculous if you did. I think it has been used pretty dramatically in a couple of instances, but you still have to pass the person you're trying to pass. It's not it's not a free pass, as you know. And I think that's the good side of it.
So what do you think about the story or the report now that Toyota is looking at coming back in? They are currently building an engine very similar to what Chevy and Honda are using. You think Toyota is a good mix to come into the IndyCar series?
Absolutely. Toyota is an amazing company, and their racing heritage is deep, and their commitment to doing it right. I mean, they look at what they've accomplished in racing. And they also bring just in the thrust of what Toyota does is they tell the story of racing well when they get involved. They have a good sense of how to articulate why they race, how they race, and help generate, if you will, the context to generate new fans. And I absolutely hope they come in. IndyCar needs it.
Yeah.
They need that third engine manufacturer. There's a constriction on teams and entries, basically, that's partially based on engines, and the other part of it is chassis at the moment.
Right.
You know, we're near the end of a chassis cycle. There's a constriction on personnel as well. There's not enough qualified team people to fill out all the team rosters that are to support all these teams and entries coming into IndyCar. I think with there'll be situations that play in favorably to that as Formula One has to downsize under the new agreement. But I look at this as we're within 12 months of being in the middle of a golden age. We're at the dawn of it at this moment. And I hope this is a golden age that preserves racing in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the interesting part of IndyCar compared to Formula One, you can run an IndyCar team for 8 to 10 million.
Yeah.
The Formula One team, you can't even turn the lights on in a shop for that kind of money.
Well, that's the massage budget.
Yeah.
So yeah, those aren't great massages either. So I'm sure the top teams have $20 million massage budgets. But the other thing I think that if you don't mind, I'd just like to say that we saw something at Indy this last year that I've not seen before, which was an absolute monster surge of interest around that race. Like it was off the charts on social media, off the charts on page views. And it wasn't all Helio. It wasn't all the qualifying drama for, let's say Will Power on the last day. The other engine of the incredible growth that we saw was Pfanner Autosport. And holy cow, that was amazing, because that's something, completely outside of what we'd had before. And I think it was bringing audience from outside the sport, which is amazing to me that, that's still there to get. We can still get to that greater conversation out there in the world about what racing means and bring in a bunch of new fans. And they stuck with us once they came in. We grew by 100% in audience, 101% actually. and over the prior year's Indy 500.
Well, I had Beth Peretta on the program one day and talked to her for an hour. Very interesting lady. She got a lot of background in motorsports, which a lot of people really didn't realize. And yeah. I thought her driver was an ideal selection. I'm a huge fan of Simona. I think she's an outstanding driver. Give her a car and watch her go. And I hope they bring her back next year.
Me too. I think it's an unfinished story. And I think you bring back that story and you bring back a big chunk of that audience that came over the wall into the walled garden of racing. And she represented people who were not being represented. Both of them did. The entire team did. I think one of the most moving moments in my entire 49 years of, and I'm a father of two really bright, talented daughters, twin daughters, who are going to go far in this world. But I walked into that garage with Beth, and I was emotionally moved by seeing, 95% of the people in that garage were women, and they were all working on the race car, down on the floor, working on the car. There was one engineering liaison from Penske that was male in my field of view. There might have been other people on the team I wasn't aware of, but it was profoundly moving to look around, and every face was a female face in that garage, but me and that other person.
Well, the interesting part about it, most of their faces are better than you go in the other garage. Your guys don't look as good.
That's true. And the other thing I think that was really clear to me is there was a joy in all of them for being there in that moment, doing this thing that hadn't collectively been done before. You literally walked into a moment that felt like history being made. And it sticks with me. As you can tell, I'm still on about it, because it really it was inspiring.
Well, most people don't realize who the chief engineer for Firestone is. She is a female as well.
I sure do.
Yeah.
And Cara very kindly wrote the letter of recommendation for my daughter Eden, who idolizes her. My daughter's studying aerospace engineering, wants to be an astronaut, and they clicked. And clicked. This is my daughter Eden, and Cara has been a real inspiration to her and helps her understand. You can do these things that seem maybe outrageous. The fact that Cara is out there doing this and doing it so well, it's inspiring to people that want the same thing that are female.
She does it like it's nothing. This is what I do. This is what I understand. When I talked to her, I was really blown away. I'd seen her and said hello to her, but I'd never sat and talked to her about how she got there. And a lot of people said, what in the world is Firestone brought in? Well, after you meet her and talk to her, you go, oh, now I know why she's here.
Yeah, and eventually here we'll be to a place where there isn't even a ripple when see there shouldn't be. My very first Formula Ford race, it went well, and I there's a punchline to this. It's not about what a great racing driver I was, but it helped me later in making excuses. But it was one of these things where I show up in a novice X on my car. Mike is kind of coaching me along, and I get up there and I go from like 16th out of a 40-ish car field up to 5th at the end. And there's a car ahead of me that's an ADF, one of the top cars, but I catch it. It's being driven by a woman named Nancy James, who was a flight attendant. Her husband was an aircraft mechanic. And I'm so excited that I couldn't pass her. I get out of the car and I go over and talk to her afterwards, and her back is turned. She's sort of beating up on her husband because I told you the car had a misfire at high speed and we didn't fix it. That guy almost caught me. And I was like crushed. I thought I was like one of the top 500 instead of the top 5,000 drivers in Formula Ford. And she turned around and realized I was there, and then she shifted gears and tried to say, what a great job, Paul, and then turned around and got after her husband to get a little bit from the misfire. And I realized, this is my life going forward. I'm going to see this over and over and over again. And I sure have. I was there when Lynn St. James out-qualified Nigel Mansell at Indy.
Yep. I worked for Dick Simon when she drove for him.
Yep. And,
an interesting lady to be around, because people didn't think she was serious. The hell she wasn't.
Well, if you were there on that qualifying line on that day, watching all that go down, she was a gunslinger when she went out there to do that, and she nailed it. And that's not for the faint-hearted, and especially in that era of race car.
And she had a good sports car career as well, and did well. And I mean, she deserved to be there. She did. She was a good representative for the sponsors.
I think she won a few races that people might have heard of. So I know she was, this is the foundation of the future. I gave a talk at the FIA Sport Conference in 2015, and at the foundation of that, the greatest opportunity for the sport to grow audience is to speak to the 51 or 52% of the world's population that's not the primary focus of audience generation efforts, which is the female audience. They drive cars, they buy all the products. There's no reason why a woman cannot be a face on the Borg Warner Trophy or ultimately win any major championship in the world at any level of activity or participation.
Yeah, well, you put a helmet on, you don't know who it is. And the trick is you got to have the talent to stay out of trouble and know where the gas pedal is and the brake. There's no reason they can't win. They're generally, from what I've seen, it's equipment more than their driving ability.
It's the flow of opportunity as well. And I see over and over and over again, women at all levels of the sport that are, supremely confident, competent, talented, and I just would like to see more. I'd like to see the competitive pool be deeper and have a lot more females in it fighting for these positions inside the car and outside the car. And for the first time in history, we have a female chief marketing person at IndyCar. And I think it's the times they are changing.
Well, I know IndyCar's got a lot. One I deal with a lot is S.J. Ludke.
Yes, SJ, yes. And SJ's worked her way up through the sport and through the marketing world. She knows her stuff.
She learned a little something being at Nike. They're not an outfit to fool with.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, you don't perform there, you don't last long. She did,
No,
did a heck of a job, and she's doing a good job here. I enjoy talking to her.
yeah.
Well,
Great.
Paul, I know you have probably more Zooms to do because it's in the middle of the morning where you are.
Not anymore. I'm now in the stretch run of what I call Zoom hell. So,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat. I enjoy talking with you. Hopefully,
Yeah,
you'll see your way to do it one more time. It only took me 6 emails to finally get the invitation for the Zoom to get to you, and I have no idea why.
well, we finally got it to work today by actually making sure you had the right email address. I
That was
think
the other
this is-
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it was but that's a significant technical issue when we don't have the right. But
Yep.
thank you, Don, for having me on again. It's been a pleasure, and it's good seeing you again. And to all the race fans who follow you and listen to your show, I just want everybody to understand we do what we do for you. That's the one lesson of working with Robin Miller. He absolutely never let us forget that.
Well, if you haven't subscribed to Racer Magazine, now is the time while you're thinking of it. Go do it. It's worth it. It's a great thing. And as I said, if you want to know what happened an hour ago, get Racer. It'll tell you. They'll have a story about it. You'll find out who did what to whom. You know, speaking of who did what to whom, I like Paul Tracy in the booth. If
Yeah,
something happened and they'll go, holy smoke, you know, that's just racing. That's racing. I did that. And more often than not, he did.
Yes, PT is pretty amusing. What I enjoyed about him is it's on his sleeve. He says what he feels, and
Yeah.
and he sort of drove that way too. He was just
Yeah.
explosive in a race car, and I think that was the first time Roger Penske ever tried to throw me off the scent when I saw Paul Tracy walk by in 1990 or 91 at Phoenix, and I said, "Are you going to hire him?" And he acted like he didn't know who I was talking about. Then I looked at him and said no. And then by the next week, he's hired.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Don.
Thanks for your time. We'll
Yep.
talk with you again, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. Also,
Thank you.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. My guest is Paul Pfanner, the founder, president, and executive producer of Racer Magazine. If you don't have it, subscribe to it. Just go to racer.com and you'll figure out how to do it. We have other guests coming up, so stick with us until the next time. Don Kay saying thanks for watching. We'll see you again.